Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darlene Jackson. I'm the acting deputy director here at the library. And it is a great pleasure and an honor to have the organization Passion to Forgive, which was formulated by the family of Myra Singleton Thompson, for many wonderful things that they're doing. If you look on the back of the flyer, there's a flyer of gun control, and on the back of it there is a description of information about Passion to Forgive, where you can go on the website to find more information. You know, when Kevin actually approached me about this program and about gun control, which is very timely for at this particular time in history, and even though it's a very tough topic, it was one that we jumped on to partner with him on this effort. I applaud him for taking on such a tough subject, because it is a tough subject, and that is something that I think that we really do need to discuss. And the major growth, when I think about Kevin and Myra, who was all about literacy, and she was into the library, and you know, her husband as well, I think of love. Because everything that she did grew out of love. And even this subject here is about love. So on that, I am going to turn it over to Jamal Middleton, who is the moderator, and Jamal will then introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you. Oh, one other thing, the restrooms, just brief. If you've never been here, the restrooms are outside on the right. And if you would please lower your cell phones to, if you would just turn them off, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd first like to thank you all for being here today. As Ms. Jackson said, this is a very tough topic, and at a lot of points in life, we are going to be challenged with things that we may not want to undertake, but it is those times when we should definitely rise to the occasion, take on the challenge, and maybe we will leave something better behind than what we started with. First, I would like to ask everyone in the room to stand, and if we could, bow our heads in a moment of remembrance for Myra Singleton Thompson, her colleagues and friends who were also lost in Emmanuel, that tragic night a year ago, and also the lives of all of the victims of gun violence that have taken place over the years. Let us bow our heads. Thank you. Today we are here to discuss issues that have unfortunately brought a dark cloud upon each of our lives, that we may possibly leave this room with a solution to our local problems and become a part of the national conversation on improving these issues. I'm speaking about gun control and also building positive relationships with law enforcement. Without belaboring on all of the issues and all of the statistics and data that you hear daily now, I want to shine a light of hope in that right now, as we sit in this room preparing to discuss possible ways to curb gun violence, the U.S. Senate, due largely to the actions by Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut and other U.S. senators, will be actively engaging in debate on the issue today. And they will make history, as today they will be having a vote on 4 amendments at 5:30 p.m. and beyond. So I would ask that each of you who are active members of this nation, and I take it to heart that each of you that are here now are here because you are active members of this nation and this community, that you should take heed to what happens today and beyond and become more and more active as we go through this course of events. While they are doing what they are doing there, we shall now begin with today's panelists. From right to left, I would like to start, and each of you gentlemen can introduce yourselves after I call on you, and then tell the audience what department or organization you are affiliated with, and if you have any other thing that you would like to share, please, by all means. First, we have Major Eric Watson, Charleston County Sheriff.
Thanks, Jamal. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Watson. I'm a major with the Sheriff's Office here in Charleston County. I'm a spokesperson for Sheriff Cannon. My role as a spokesperson for the agency is to coordinate or communicate with the community as well as with the media. I'm also in charge of recruitment and community policing too as well within my agency. I have over 22 years of experience in law enforcement. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy, so I'm glad you guys invited me to be found.
Very well, to have you. Next, we have Lieutenant Craig Harris, Internal Affairs, Mount Pleasant Police Department.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Harris with the Mount Pleasant Police Department. I've been with the Mortgage Department for 20 years. I've been in many divisions. Under my command, I handle all internal complaints as well as external complaints, and also deal with recruiting. Glad to be here for this moment. Hopefully, my words and the mission for my agency will have a great impact into what we're trying to do as a community.
Thank you, Lieutenant. To his left, we have Detective Jamel Foster, North Charleston Police Department.
Good afternoon. I'm Jamel Foster with the City of North Charleston Police Department. I've been employed with the City of North Charleston for the past 11 years. My current assignment is patrol. A former narcotics detective for the past 7 years. And my job duties now is to patrol the southern end of the city, which includes Shakur, Union Heights, Ackerby, so forth and so on.
Thank you, Officer Foster. And to his left, we have Sergeant Trevor Sheeler, City of Charleston Police Department.
I'm Trevor Sheeler with the City Police. I've been with the city for 25 and a half, almost 26 years. First 12 of that was in patrol, but the last 14 or so has been in crime prevention and community relations. So neighborhood communications and youth functions and things like that are my main job description.
Thank you, Sergeant Sheeler, and thank all of you again for being here today. We know that you have valuable work that you're doing in the community, and we'd like to take a moment of your time to expand some knowledge for the members of the gallery and hopefully out into the Charleston community. So with that, we shall begin on our discussion around police-civilian relationships. By all means, I'd like to open the floor to any member of the panel that would like to answer the questions. Please just limit your responses to possibly a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and that will allow for us to flow freely through the discussion and give other members of the panel a proper amount of time to give responses. With that, we'll go with the first question. Everyone knows the motto of law enforcement all over the nation is to serve and protect. What does this phrase mean to you? And you can answer as you wish.
Well, I mean, historically, that model began with the LAPD back in the early 50s or a little later after that. And it's actually protect and serve. And that was their way of trying to connect with law enforcement and the community by placing mottos on their vehicles. As far as I'm concerned, I think protect and serve is very broad, whereas if you're a public servant in our capacity with law enforcement, it is your responsibility to provide unbiased service to the community which you serve, regardless of race, gender, and make sure when you're providing that service that it's being administered equally and fairly across all spectrums.
Thank you.
Thank you. To to add on what Major Watson said, protect is pretty much clear cut. You know, our job is to protect the citizens and the property. However, when we're looking at service is being visible and accessible to your community, being that on. And we all have served in many ways, in different ways, depending on the department size. You know, you look at your smaller agencies, things that they see that may not be, they may be important, may not be as important in a larger agency due to the volume of emergency calls. And for example, there may be an incident where someone may need some fixture done in the house or something like that. You know, the small agencies, they're there to help. Large agencies are a little different. So service is what we do, is being visible and accessible for our community, no matter what it is.
Thank you.
I'm along the lines of the same as Major Watson and Lieutenant Harris. Protection means to myself is to protect citizens and their property from the criminal element. And also, when you're dealing with service, is to provide service to the community, whether it's an emergency call or non-emergency call.
Thank you.
Along with everybody up here, we probably changed your grandmother's tires. We have turned off the upstairs neighbor's water so your apartment wouldn't get flooded. We found your dog and brought him home, helped fix your bike, and maybe stopped the neighborhood drug dealer and caught a bank robber along the way. Police services, you know, is almost a better description than the word law enforcement in the modern area. There's a lot of laws that need enforcing, but when we do it with a service mentality, then you get better cooperation and people appreciate you more. When I talk to children a lot of times, probably 200 times a year, I'll use this phrase when I'm talking about the uniform. I'll mention that, you know, our uniform, anybody in a uniform is in some position to help you if you're lost or hurt or whatever, but in a police uniform or a fire medic, the badge makes a difference. That badge is something when we took our oath, we were promising to help everybody as much as we can, even if we might get hurt doing it. And they need to, you know, have a little bit more respect for that emergency services, those emergency service personnel, because they made a promise like that most people in other job descriptions don't have to make. But that's just an important factor, I think.
Thank you. And I should point out to the gallery that along with myself, each of these men who are up here serving your communities day in and day out are all Charlestonians. Each one of these men that you see uniformed here before you, these are all men of your community and have been for the entirety of their lives. So take note that those amongst you are probably your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your aunts. These are friends of your relatives and friends. So as much as they are here to help us, we are here to help them also. And with that, we will move on to our second question. With the rise in negative events involving law enforcement, has your experience of being a law enforcement officer changed over the last few years? And if possible, can you share an example with us?
For me, as an individual in the 20 years, I can say, hear me now? I can say no. And the reason why I said that, because I'm probably fortunate to have both my parents who retired as law enforcement for 35 years, both 35 years, taught me the way, and not just retired. I mean, they were born and raised here in Charleston, and did all of their law enforcement career in Charleston. So to be the young man at the kitchen table to hear the conversation and how to interact with the community, and what was more important was to, you know, your words and actions, what they told me. Your words and actions mean more to the community than anything else. And I use that every day I go to work. And, you know, I have people calling me for, whether it's talking to their nephew, being a mentor, talking to their son, daughter, whatever it is, just a word of advice. And that's why I said just to be accessible and be available for your community.
Thank you.
As far as myself, I would agree with Lieutenant Harris saying, no, it hasn't changed. I've been in public safety for 20 years. I had 9 in the fire department, North Charleston Fire Department, and the last 11 in the police department. But I was told by a deputy chief during my interview process, he looked at me and said, Foster, you would make it far in law enforcement if you remember one thing I told you, one thing I tell you. And what he told me was, you would always want to treat people the way you would want somebody to treat your mother. And that was powerful. We all know we want people to respect us, but we don't want nobody disrespecting our mother. So I take that motto with me in the community, and it's paid off. I can talk to anybody, get information from anybody. Sometimes, I got a cooler in my car right now. I'll go in the neighborhoods, old guy on the corner, passing out bottles of water. Take old clothes, old shoes from me and my wife, just take it in the community and, pass it out. So I say that to say this, I want people to be respectful to my mother, so I'm gonna be respectful to the citizens.
Thank you.
I've only encountered on occasion folks that seem to be jumping on a media bandwagon that want to paint law enforcement with some wide brush that they've, seen stories from somewhere else across the country, but it's only been on occasion. We've long enjoyed a really good relationship between the communities and the City of Charleston Police Department, and there just has not been quite the level of friction that some places have encountered. I just don't think so.
Thank you very much.
I think it's natural for anyone, including us in law enforcement, when you look at things that's occurring around this country, to have a sense of negative attitude or negative outlook on the way law enforcement in general is being portrayed. Hey, I grew up in the inner city of Charleston, so growing up, 95% of my interaction with law enforcement was negative. So growing up as a child, I didn't like the police, period. Growing up on the east side of Charleston, just because of that interaction that I experienced personally. Back then, we didn't have an effective community policing program as far as law enforcement officers get out in the cars, interact with youth, just engaging us in a friendly manner. That did not exist back then. Now, law enforcement in general is evolving. You've seen us, we're out there a whole lot more, 4 agencies out there a whole lot more, inviting the community into our house. And so they can understand that we're in this together. It's a partnership. In order for you to build that trust, you have to extend an open invitation to the community as a whole and just be more invited to everyone, just not one particular community. So,
Thank you, Major. Now to our next topic, body cameras. This is something that was really a very hot issue with the current events of the past year and a half, 2 years. And there's been a lot of movement on it, not just here in South Carolina, but across the nation. So with that, body cameras are becoming a part of law enforcement routinely across the nation. How do you feel the use of body cameras helps or hurts the work that you do as an officer?
I feel that, I myself feel that body cameras are indeed helpful, but because it captures the incident from a different angle. For an example, if I do a traffic stop, you see that one angle from a vehicle to the subject's vehicle. But with a body camera, it gives me an up-close and personal view of that subject. Just in case maybe that subject decides to run from the vehicle during my encounter with him, during that traffic stop, it can be used to help identify that subject as well.
There have been several incidents where folks will want to file a complaint, and when the professional standards office goes back and looks at the video, it did not occur the way the complainant is saying, or the way that they remember. Maybe they were incapacitated that night, or maybe they gave wrong information to their parent, and the parent made the complaint. But we've had several that have been exonerated because of what the video shows. And you'll find it's a two-way street, that having the camera, sometimes the person you're addressing, they behave better than they might if you didn't have it. And then it keeps folks on a level instead of someone getting higher than the other.
I agree with Foster and Sarge here, because with the body camera, since we implemented the body camera, it's like an open door. It's like an open door invitation to complaints, because knowing that as me and working in internal affairs, the complainant can also come in and review the camera. Sometimes anxiety, emotions get a little high, and when they see exactly how see the incident as it displays on the video, it actually changed a lot of the complaint anxiety, as well as the body camera work in conjunction with our in-car cameras as well. So, but the main thing about the body camera is that it captures a whole lot of things, and it's good for training, because like I said, it works both ways. It works for the complainant as well as work for the agency if there is a problem, issue for training, whatever it is.
I think body cameras are a good thing. I said, but we need to understand that it's not the cure. It's not a cure for all. It's not going to solve the problems that exist in the community. In other words, so if an officer gets involved in an altercation with a suspect, you may not be able to see every angle, even with the body cam. So it can be misleading to assume that because I have a body cam on me, that you can clearly see everything that happened between the time I did the traffic stop, the time the altercation occurred, or I fired a shot. You may only see parts of that video. So I think when we educate the community as a whole, we need to make sure that they understand that it is not the cure or the remedy for all. It's a good thing because at least you can have an idea to know what happened, versus relying on a dash cam in the car where it's fixed and stationary. But at the same time, too, it's not the cure for all.
Thank you. You all touched on a couple of topics that actually feed into my next question, and it has to do with the interaction between officer and, as you refer to, a subject. It's said that anxiety can often play a role in police-civilian interactions. What is your suggestion to the community on how to avoid an escalation of an officer-involved event?
Just like any relationship, you want to have a mutual respect between yourself and that person. Like we all grew up respecting each other. We have differences of opinion. There's a way you go about that. If there's an issue out there that you have with an officer, there's ways, there are steps you can take outside that confrontation to address those issues. Confronting an officer on the street is not the proper form. I would recommend, when I do panels like this, I recommend that you deal with the situation at hand. You get once it's resolved, very next day, on that same day, you have an agency that he works for. You can file a complaint with Internal Affairs. You have a chief of police. You can file a complaint with them. You have a sheriff, in my instance. You can file a complaint to that office. So, but having an argument on the street, it's never a good thing. At the end of the day, we want to go home to our family, to my mom, to my son. And so we're going to do what we got to do to protect ourselves. At the same time, too, we have to make sure the amount of force that we use is reasonable.
If I may, before we get the next response, if one of you would kind of walk the community through a little more on how an individual would approach the department if they have a complaint or an issue that they avoided at the time of an incident with an officer, but wanted to approach the department the next day.
He's currently in IA, Internal Affairs, so he's an expert at that.
Make sure you get the mic close so we can hear.
Yeah. All right. That's just like Major said. Most of the things in law enforcement, we tell officers, common sense. What's going to come out of handling something right there on the incident, on the scene? Nothing. And what we look at as is responsible, being responsible and responsiveness. Responsible as well as responsiveness. Meaning, there's an issue. We got policies in place, procedures in place, okay? And first thing we need to do is see. So I would suggest for a citizen to file a formal complaint to what we call now professional officer standards, as well as it's the same terminology for internal affairs. And when you file a formal complaint to explain everything that you see, you believe is not right, then that investigation will start with internal affairs. And information shared with that complaint is only between the internal affair officer and the chief of police. And every agency most have a policy on how often the complainant as well as the officer involved is updated and given status of the complainant. But there's only one person usually do the investigation to keep advised out of it, and the findings will be addressed to the chief of police, and the chief of police make a determination on what needs to be taken from there. But again, it's policies, procedures. We're not going to get anything accomplished when everybody's out on the scene yelling and screaming, because we have to deal with the fact of the matters. We have to go by policy. We have to go by procedure. Just like doing the algebra problem, everything has steps to get to the solution. Okay, it may feel good to yell, but it doesn't accomplish the goal, and that's the thing. We want to accomplish the goal the right way.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any other responses?
Just a little bit is that's when things have gone a little bit awry or there's been tensions on the scene. I'm on the preventive side, so I've been in crime prevention a long time, and a large part of that is the community relations of each of us has a citizens academy that we do at least once a year, if not more. Mount Pleasant, I think, has 2 a year that they do, where we do, as you said, invite them into our house. We're inviting them into our headquarters and other off-site places to see how we work, why things are done certain ways, and to sort of open those mysteries up of how the SWAT team operates and what they don't do, and how dispatch works, and all those kinds of things, and dispelling people's preconceived notions and letting them realize that the officer that stops them because they ran the stop sign, when he gets home, he's got to mow his grass and walk his dog and those kinds of things too. We're just regular folks, but it is our calling to provide for the safety of our community. They go and they work at a store or a restaurant, but it's our calling to work in our community. Now, again, back to the beginning of this, is dealing with folks at a younger level, younger age when you can. For several years, we've had a youth version of the Citizens Academy, which gets kids younger, and then now, it's a sad thing, but with the prevalence of officers in elementary school now, and different agencies have their different models of that, but a good outcome of that has been that children are now interacting with police officers on a daily basis, high fives, smiles, drawing pictures, and things like that, and we won't see an outcome of that for 3 or 5 or 10 years when these 5 and 7-year-olds are teenagers and older, having more respect for the police that they're dealing with if they have to deal with this. But hopefully that'll be a good outcome of that, of having more officers in the schools. It's sad to say we have to have officers in schools, but you've got a lot more interaction happening younger in their lives that way.
Thank you. And again, one of the responses, or a couple of the responses, actually lead us into our next topic, which is talking about contact with juveniles, and specifically what is known as DMC, or disproportionate minority contact. And I'll go right into the question, and we'll have a couple of responses for this, and then we'll move on into the next portion of our discussion for the day. But the question states, DMC, or disproportionate minority contact, is a fact in many cities across the nation. And since the public outcry after the Walter Scott shooting, there is a noticeable increase in arrests of non-minorities. What is being done in your department to ensure that the law is administered fairly, regardless of race?
This is a awkward. It's kind of awkward to answer because the DMC Act of 2002, as we all know, was actually generated for juvenile, but we still will utilize that same theory for an adult. And when you're related to the adult aspect of it, we look at how we identify, assess, evaluate, and monitor the changes in the office's interaction with different ethnic groups. If there's an issue, we note it, and we create adjustments or some type of intervention program to assess the situation to make it better, if that's the case. But it's just pretty much we monitor and we assess it if there's an issue with it.
Any other responses?
Yeah, real quick, I think that we just go basically where the crime occurs. You know, I've been doing this thing for 22 years, and if we have a high crime area, and we patrol mostly the rural areas, James Island, Johns Island, and Hollywood, and Ravenel. So we typically patrol where the citizens want us to control because they're having issues with crime, regardless of the race of that community. So for the most part, when we relate to juveniles, we are taking steps as to trying to reduce the arrest rate for the juveniles. We're taking additional steps like counseling, warrant release, doing intervention programs to not put them in the system at an early age just because they're juveniles. Be it said, if they commit a violent crime, it is what it is. I mean, so it goes back to the community, it goes back to the families of those kids, as juveniles. You need to ask yourself when it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning where your sons and daughters are. I mean, so for the most part, there's nothing happening at night after 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, other than bad things. So I've investigated a number of homicides, and the vast amount of deaths I've witnessed myself or investigated is mostly African Americans. You know, so that is an alarming number across the board. So I think we need to ask ourselves honestly, you know, what are we doing to correct that? Why are they out there? Why aren't they homes? It goes back to individual responsibility.
And just to add on to Major Watson, again, you know, disturbing school was one of the biggest high number of issues that this act forcing law enforcement to make an arrest. And you had juveniles that are actually in school at age 17, and as you know, the state of South Carolina, 17 you consider as an adult. So when you make an arrest for a child who's 17 years of age, you know, they go down to the banks because of the big house, and now they have a criminal record. So the good thing is that as a whole, as an agency across the low country, we all have changed and put more of the responsibility back on the school, and provide more programs, just like Hassan was saying, to help these kids in reading and writing and getting the education, because you know, lack of education is going to cause problems out in the street. So we want to keep our kids in the school, and that's one of the biggest community-based intervention programs that you want to see that's being done across the board.
And just to add, as far as the juvenile is concerned, City of North Charleston, we visit the schools daily. Each officer must visit an elementary school and camps during the summer.
Thank you all for those responses. I appreciate your time, and we're going to close out the police-civilian relationships portion of our discussion, but we will take a couple of questions, just one or two questions from the gallery, if there are individuals that would like to ask a question. I will take that by notice of hands. If not, then we will take a short 5-minute break. We have one question right here, ma'am.
I work with the school district and work with these students who are charged with disturbing school, and it's unfortunate for them, unfortunate for the families. So my question to law enforcement, I know there has been a lot of discussion about this one charge of disturbing school that covers so many different things. How do you, or do you have any suggestions for the school district in terms of what we can do? What are the plans in terms of the police department, in terms of what you're going to do to decrease the number of students who are charged with disturbing school?
That's a good question, and I think that's a mission that yourself and the school district and the SROs need to sit down, come together on, because I believe it could be a joint discussion with a joint outcome, because we're there for the kids as well as the school.
And I'll elaborate on that too as well. The schools, and I'm not talking about a particular school district, but the schools in general have to understand that we're not there for them to use as a tool to enforce their policies. You know, that's example what happened in Columbia. That's a good example. To call a law enforcement officer in to take that kind of action, you're putting us against. We're there for a reason, is to make sure that that school is safe, the kids are safe, and everyone's going about their day-to-day activity on a regular basis. But when it comes down to enforcing school policies, that is not our responsibility as a whole. But what I'm trying to say is that too many times, law enforcement across the nation is being used in that role, and we should not be.
I get it, but just that one charge of disturbing school covers so many things that we're dealing with, and that was the question. But
And
I do agree with you.
And I believe that they were discussing making some changes to that law recently.
Okay. Thank you.
One more so this hand right here.
For Major Watson, you said that you grew up with a negative relationship or perspective on police and law enforcement. When did that change, and how do you have conversations with young people to help encourage them in a different direction with that kind of?
Well, it changed because it changed. That was able to become a cop. Honestly, my interactions with law enforcement, me personally, my friends, seeing how they were treated back then, I wanted to learn what that officer knew at that time. Why was he taking certain actions towards us? For example, just standing on a corner. Why were we being bothered or just being, you can say harassed just being on the corner. So I wanted to learn, what kind of power, authority he was taught to do that. So that I use that as a positive tool to get in law enforcement. To me, I can look at it from both sides now. So when someone comes in to file a complaint to our agency, I'm not just going to shun them away. I've been there. I walked the road many times. But at the same time, too, I understand that folks will call in or come in with a complaint that is simply not valid. That's exaggerated. So that that interaction with law enforcement is what changed my life as far as making me want to get into law enforcement and making me want to help my community.
And before I take the next question, the other point I guess I should state is that of the 5 of the gentlemen that you see up here today, the major, myself, and Officer Foster are all East Side born and raised. So there again, You know, there is a dynamic that can be defeated, but there has to be help from the community along the way. I don't know if I'm speaking for the gentleman here, but definitely in my case, without assistance from members of the community, I would not be standing here today. And just like the Major, I am a very active member of this community. And we'll take a question here and then we'll end
Good
this session.
afternoon, I'm Reverend Sykes, and I attend church at Vanderhorst Memorial, which is 66 Hanover Street, and we're right in the middle of the community, and there's a lot going on in that community there, 66 Hanover Street. We're doing a worship service on Saturday with Reverend Sharon Risher, who is also very involved with gun violence and trying to curb that in the environment. She'll be with us on Saturday at 12 noon at Vanderhorst, 66 Hanover Street, and she's coming to talk with us also about gun violence. But my question to the panel is, how can ministers or the church community get more involved with what's going on in the community and police interaction with the community? Because we've tried having community days and, you know, things like that for the church to be more involved with what's going on in the community. So what are some of your suggestions that perhaps the church can do to be more a part of the community and what's going on there?
I would say having panels like this right here, you know, community forums, panels. I've been to a number of churches and we've participated in panels where they allow the congregation to come to the church and it's open to the public, and it's more educational. That allow us to educate your congregation on ways that things that you can do to help your community. The church plays a tremendous role in law enforcement. We have a chaplain service that's attached to law enforcement. We have one right in the back behind you. So they play a vital role not only to law enforcement, but also to the community as well. So we respond to a homicide. They're not only there for law enforcement, but they're also there for the victim's family as well. So the church plays a very important role in public safety. So having panels like this here is very helpful.
It goes back to what I said from the very beginning about service. Being visible and accessible. Going into the community, the pastors, the law enforcement come together, having events for kids. You know, it always start with the kids, and coming out and actually educating the community through the church on issues, current issues, safety. And I'm pretty sure we'll get into the next topic, and I'll elaborate a little more about the education part of it. But the church, like you said, is the major role.
All right.
I'll just say that letting the police know when you're having the functions that you're having and inviting us to come along and be part of it.
Okay.
Probably 20 times this summer. I'll be speaking at one summer camp or another summer church one, summer school one, summer random other places. But just let us know when it is, and we'll try and make it either Lieutenant Hawkins or the crime prevention office. There's a lot of us, the CAT units and Team 1. That's a big part of their job, is to go to those if they know that they're happening.
Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for.
Let us know.
All right. And with that, we would like to end our police-civilian relationships portion of the discussion. We'll take about a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and begin with the gun control portion of our discussion.
She's been everywhere. Absolutely. She went down to Whitefield. We're trying to figure out what's
where juveniles, if they get in trouble,
It's just, I don't know. A lot of it is
One more minute and then we'll get back to our second portion of the discussion, please. One more minute.
I'm looking at the clock. Even the ship already kicked Oh yeah, they go to the fence.
I know this morning because they they're voting today. Two bills that.
If we could have everyone head back to their seats. Begin to move into the gun control portion of our discussion. All right, and now we will begin with our gun control portion of this panel discussion. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for being here today. We know that your time is important, our officers' time is important, and we'd like to make sure that we are being thoughtful about each person's process, purpose, and mission as they go throughout this day. So with that in mind, we will begin with the first topic of discussion, and that is our first question. Guns are clearly a problem in today's society. How does and again, before I go any further, this is for any member of the panel. You can answer as you choose, and please limit your responses to 1.5, maybe 2 minutes. But how does gun laws affect your ability to police? And I should be a little more clear with respect to the incidences that have taken place here in Charleston, and specifically with the incidents at Emmanuel. You have a term being used across the nation as the Charleston loophole. We don't know exactly how full and dense this term is, but with respect to the Charleston area, how does this term affect your ability to police?
Well, if you look at, no?
No, we're not.
All right. Well, if you look at, well, we only enforce, our role in this whole gun control issues is to enforce laws that are currently on the books. So if you're asking me, will closing that loophole, will it affect what we police? The answer is no. We're going to always police what we police. We're going to police based on current laws. The vast amount of weapons that are used to commit violent crimes are stolen at our level. That's not discounting what happened last year or what just happened recently in Orlando. Obviously, those are some issues that need to be addressed, that they are tackling with at the state level and federal level. But if you want to ask me if closing the loophole would affect how we police, no, because we only police what's currently on the books. So if the law changes, and most of it is going to be administrative rules that require you to, just say hypothetically, extend the waiting period from 3 days to a week or whatever the case may be. That's an administrative rule that they'll have to implement. But we will keep on policing what we police based on current law on the books.
Thank you. Any other responses?
I just want to second, I agree with Major Watson. We're going to bully because it doesn't affect the way we police. If anything, it will make an awareness not just for the officers, but also for individuals in the community as far as the gun law goes.
Absolutely. I'd like to break away from my topic for a second and just discuss a moment that I have had, and if one of you would care to share the details surrounding the ability of an individual to do so, I think it would probably shed some light on some of the issues that are currently in society. We have a number of individuals that are now purchasing firearms, and some simply displaying their firearms for the purpose of what they believe may be a deterrent. I had a situation recently where I was traveling along King Street, which King Street to me is one of the safest portions of the Charleston region. And I came across there in very close proximity to an individual who was non-law enforcement that was wearing a rather sizable sidearm. And, you know, I don't know all of the details around South Carolina's gun laws, but explain to me how that would be possible. If one of you have the details on South Carolina's gun law, or I should say would be open carry gun law.
There isn't much. It probably was not legal unless he has a certain kind of a permit. If he was working in the banking, you know, if he was a guard for some sort of ATM delivery or something like that.
Right.
Did you happen to call the police when you saw that?
No, I didn't call the police on the individual. The individual was just walking along King Street. I, being a citizen of individual rights, took the high road and assumed that this individual would have some type of permit that would allow him to carry openly on such a busy street, King Street, near John Street, I believe. So I was just interjecting so that maybe if any of these individuals came across a situation like that, maybe one of you officers would have some perspective to share so that they may know how to handle a situation like that.
I would say if you come across a situation like that and you're unsure, call the police. Immediately call the police.
An officer's gonna check for whatever permits that person has. He may be from another state and think that his permit crosses lines and maybe he's incorrect. He may have some sort of a security job that he thinks that it's allowed, and he may be misreading that permit. And it's just maybe he's otherwise permitted, but it just needs to get clarified. I had encountered one a while back that he was misinterpreting what the rules said on the back of his card, and I got with his employer and straightened him out. But call the police, because we need to check and see whether it's legal or not.
Thank you. Number 2, in your experience, has the conversation about gun rights versus gun control become cloudy and distorted in your experience?
Of course, with the help with with the media too, as well as hyping. I'm not talking about local media here, but the national level. I have friends in the media too, so
Absolutely.
But at the national level, yeah. But there's a Second Amendment right. I'm a strong believer in that right. I believe that I should be allowed to own a weapon to protect myself. Given our history, I mean that should be a right that we should protect. So you always have both sides, challenging each other, activists who are against who want more gun control, and you have on your left or your right, you have folks who are strong advocates for the Second Amendment. That will always be an issue in our society, but no right is absolute. But that, if I would say, that will be one of those rights that is almost guaranteed for an American citizen to have. So that is a right that I cherish. I have weapons in my own home, but it comes with a responsibility. I think you should have some kind of, just like driving a car, some kind of, regulations to control how you carry your weapon. With establishments you can visit with your weapon. Just recently we had a bill signed that's allowing them to carry weapons into bars and restaurants. Just recently, so all it depends on what state you're in.
Any other responses?
Oh, I just agree with Major. It's all about the Second Amendment.
Thank you very much. Again, talking about the topic of DMC, or disproportionate minority contact, how does race, officer-involved contacts, and arrests affect who can buy a gun?
We don't determine any contact we come in with the citizens. We don't determine based on race who can buy a gun. Those are up to the federal and state laws that who can buy a gun. And I don't think it's not determined on race.
Thank you. Any other response? All right. As an officer, you are to administer the law as it is written. Do you support expanded background checks, and why or why not?
Once again, that goes back to the federal and state guidelines. If the state sees something on an individual criminal history, and the federal government sees something on the criminal history, and they want to expand it, that goes back to the state and the federal guidelines. Purchasing firearms.
And also currently, if you have like a domestic violence situation, whereas it goes in family court judges prohibits people, men or women, from carrying firearms in their homes. So there's restrictions on who are allowed, who can carry weapons. or can be in possession of weapons in their home. So background checks is eventually is coming. A lot of folks are against it, but it's a natural thing. It's going to happen. Society's evolving, and the more gun control becomes an issue, background checks statewide will be a requirement. I mean, you have Orlando, for example. You have homegrown terrorists now. So that's going to be a natural requirement. That's going to eventually happen.
Thank you. The increase in gun violence across the nation is causing gun control advocates to step up their campaign to limit the amount of guns in the public. Adversely, gun rights supporters are stepping up their purchases in fear of a shutdown on gun shows. This brings more guns into the public, and some think that ultimately some of those guns will end up in the wrong hands. How is your department preparing to deal with the possibility of an increase in acts of violence involving firearms that may otherwise end up in the public?
In reference to preparing for the possibility of an increased act of violence, I know with our agency, we've been doing it a lot, and we hold the officers accountable every day. With a lot of our programs, we're looking at crime prevention. We have locking and elusive signs that we pass out just every day, and I'll go back and explain to you. And we have what we call a victim of opportunity crime. It's a slip that we pass around while you're sleeping. We're checking your outside your house, your car, even during the daytime. If you see a vehicle that's unlocked, we're going to put that sticker on your car to let you know that you are a possible victim of an opportunity. And with that said, this educate the public about being victimized. And when you're looking at the accessible to weapons, I think it's best for us to educate those who may have weapons in the house, how to secure it, how to properly handle weapons. Because this is an ongoing topic. And you have your pros and cons when you're looking at gun control. You have your pros and cons when you're looking at just the word of assessment of guns. So, in order to make it better, I think it's best to educate the handle of guns. I mean, you look at the city of Chicago, they have the strictest gun law, but the crime rate is triple. Okay, so we can have a very stringent gun law, but then again, are we ready for Chicago? We all feel the pain that our brothers and sisters in Chicago Police Department are going through right now because of the high rise of crime dealing with guns. Not to get off the topic, but with the social media, and with the Snapchat, the kids with Snapchat, and all the stuff is going on, and this gun control is one thing, but the bigger picture is way bigger than just that. A lot of things are going on, and all it takes is a Snapchat to send to somebody else, and we just create a problem.
Thank you. And I'd like to, if at all possible, have each department expand on that. We are not talking about necessarily a policy question. This is, in general, a training question. What is your department doing, or what does your department do currently in preparation of a gun-involved incident?
I think as you go to work daily, you never can tell what incident is going to be involving a gun. You try to be proactive, be diligent in the community, get out with folk, but there's no specific guidelines or set ways you can even go by saying, I'm going to go to work today, there's going to be a shooting. You don't know. You just have to react off of that incident that is happening.
And also, what we're doing, we have what we call active shooter training. and we go out to the community, go out to businesses, commercial establishments, and we offer free training. Whereas we get a certified deputy, go out there and host a training session, and we teach the community how to deal with an active shooter situation, be it happening in their business or a public building like the library. We teach them and we show them videos on how to respond to active shooters. So that we're taking a more of an active approach to it, and we also host a number of training seminars at our facility too on a regular basis as well.
I didn't realize that's what you were actually asking. I thought
Yes.
you were, how are we training the individual officers? Officers train every day for lots of different kinds of emergencies, whether it's a fire or car crashes or whichever. But along Major's lines, the community education, whether it's to certain types of businesses or hospitals, we offer those. I think most of our agencies will do that, particularly the folks in my job description. We do those trainings for that locality because it really needs to be tailored to the individual property and business type or school or college campus or whatever it is that you're dealing with. Having one giant generic one and having a few representatives come is okay for a starting point, but you need to go to that property and do a security survey of the property to begin with to help them limit their general opportunities for things to happen, and then staff training or student training of the employees on how to react to different, and get them to create their own plans internally within their organization of what we're going to do if this happens, if that happens, and not just dealing with violent incidents, but also what are we going to do if an earthquake happens, what are we going to do when a fire happens. These are the procedures to do for different emergency types.
Is this, and maybe one of you could answer this, is this something that any individual organization or business could contact their local department and secure?
They do it on a regular basis, yes.
Well, with that wraps up the gun control portion of the questions that I have for the law enforcement officers. Now I will open it up to the gallery to take a few questions. If you all would please direct your questions in the form of a gun control question, and we will allow the officers to respond as they wish. I will open the floor for questions. Yes, ma'am.
So both as an individual citizen who happens to be in law enforcement, or your perspective as a law enforcement individual, how do we get illegal guns off the street?
Well, that's a very complicated and difficult question to answer. We have thousands of weapons that's on the street. We have gun trade occurring from here to New York, and so that's the black market gun trade. So that's a difficult question to answer. The only thing I can say, it starts with suspects or these guys, these bad guys, break into your home. They're going there for one reason, for jewelry, money, or weapons. Same thing applies to your vehicles. So that's how the vast majority of weapons get on the streets, through burglaries, through auto thefts. Folks leave the cars, like Lieutenant Harris said, leave the cars unlocked, and you're going to have a wad of money on the counter if they want that weapon. So being irresponsible, gun owners who are irresponsible is our biggest problem, because they're just not having their guns locked up, secure in their homes, locked up, secure in their vehicles. And these guys who are just looking for convenient ways to just break into your home or your car, just steal that gun and to sell it on the market. So they exchange hands.
Your question sounded like it was, how do we get them off? Once they're on the street, it's difficult, but keeping them off, having, like you said, responsible gun ownership is very important. Last year, we had close to 100 guns stolen out of cars in the city, and about half of those were listed as being unlocked. And this year, we're over 50 and at 60%. So it's people that own guns need to remember that they had it in the car and bring it back in the house at night, because they're getting taken out of the cars. Whether the people are forcing entry into the car to find what they can find and they happen to find a gun, or if they're just in a neighborhood where they're walking down every street and pulling every door handle that comes open. In suburbia, there are certain percentages of neighborhoods that folks that just don't lock their car at night. So it may be a laptop that gets stolen, or it may be a gun, or if they left a key in the car, the whole car is gone. But with so many guns disappearing that way, it's just safe storage of your firearms is a #1 priority, whether it's to keep it from a thief or to keep it from a child finding it in the closet and hurting their brother with it.
It goes back also to what I said earlier, responsible and responsiveness. And until we understand those two words, we want to continue to have these issues. And the reason why I say that, because I get a lot of complaints from citizens about officers placing the VOC's tag on a car, or rather on a property. And the officers just letting them know that you could have been a victim if you don't lock your car. The officer may see something that's valuable, such as a gun. And this is the issue that we get that comes back to us. And the responsiveness is to be receptive to the feedback that you're getting from us as a community member. So if we pay attention to what the officers are doing at nighttime or even during the daytime, and try to start locking the doors and securing your items, that could be a start. Because like you said, the guns are already out there. And we call it a straw purchase. They purchase these guns right off the street from one person to the next. And it's very difficult.
I'll take a question right here, ma'am.
Along the same lines, would it be helpful if there was some kind of law or statute that would penalize people who leave their firearms? I know it's funny, but it's not funny. Getting it passed in the State House is funny. But but that's not the question. The question is academic. If there was some kind of penalty for irresponsible disposition of firearms so that they could be stolen or children could get them, would you think that would be helpful in your job in trying to get guns off the street?
That's a real good question. And unfortunately, none of us on this panel can really solidify or validate your question due to the fact that I wish we had the authority to go along with it, because I'd be the first one to sign your paper. But unfortunately, would it be helpful? Yeah. I mean, to hold other people accountable for their actions, yes.
You got a question right here, ma'am.
Yes, there are some fundamental truths in my mind. We will never, as a society, be able to eradicate guns, and it's just never going to happen. But my question then becomes, in this area, and I'm not from Charleston, I've only been here shortly. I came here long enough to align myself with Mother Emmanuel's Bible study and not go to church that Wednesday. So I know nothing about Charleston, so my question once again becomes, are you seeing in this area the major assault weapons like the one that was used in Orlando? Are you seeing a shift in the type of weapon that you're confronted with on the streets of Charleston?
From a patrol standpoint, you see all types of weapons. Assault weapons, revolvers, semi-automatics, see all types of weapons. So I don't think it's not a shift between a 22 versus a AR-15. You just come in contact with various types of weapons.
So there's always been the AK, whatever they are, out there that you've had to deal with. So,
It's a lot.
okay.
It's out there. There's a lot of guns out there.
And also, you have to understand too that most of these folks who are using these weapons illegally are targeted folks in that same environment that deal with that same criminal element. In other words, drug dealers going against drug dealers. Folks who are committing the same similar crimes are generally targeting each other towards violence. So you and I walk in the street, it's highly unlikely for us to be involved in that kind of activity. It all depends on, you know, where you're visiting. But typically, it's violence geared towards that criminal element.
We have to also remember, you know, in today's society, and a lot of theorists and a lot of sociologists have actually classified that we have a culture of honor issue going on. And when you look at individuals, this culture is, just like Major said, you know, one another disrespecting their honor. And in their mind, that's all they know to do. What they see is to take matters in our hand, adversary effect, in other words. So we're seeing more and more of the culture of honor theory, and that's just you know, earlier now years, 20, 30 years ago, you know, homicide was just a basic homicide, but now a lot of the homicides that you see lately is more argumentative homicide due to gang-related or drug-related.
Thank you.
I think this gentleman in the.
So are you saying that the background check, or improving background checks wouldn't help you as much as maybe it's perceived to help in these kinds of situations? You seem to be saying that the guns are criminal, illegal guns, so the background check wouldn't really help in that situation.
Well, background checks will help you track an individual.
Yeah.
Should something occur, that would help the state and federal agencies track the buyer, you know, but will that help prevent violence? That's been occurring for years. No, it goes deeper than that, because most of the violent crimes that have occurred or occurring are committed by, you know, stolen weapons.
Yeah.
You know, so the background check is good. It helps us track the background, or just backtrack that person as far as the sale and purchase.
Once the gun is taken from a car, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, he can buy a weapon and do a background check and clear it, and next thing you know, someone breaking his house or car, the gun is gone.
And once that gun leaves that vehicle by an individual, it might touch 10, 20 hands before we even recover it.
And the worst thing about it is they don't know the serial number to that weapon. It can be anybody's weapon.
Right here.
I have a question, and I guess it would take a personal, well, you all could answer it personally, because I believe with God all things are possible. I believe if the community comes together and we work together, then gun control can have a vital change in our nation. As individuals and what you've seen on the street, do you believe that we can actually do something with gun control as far as our nation is concerned, or are we just at a point where we should just throw up our hands and say it'll never change?
We have a lot of laws on the books, and the laws that we have on the books aren't being enforced. And that deal with folks who are being arrested with having guns in their possession, but are being allowed to plead out in trial and sentencing. So that's not a deterrent for them, because now they're being set back out on the street and they're committing the same crime. So we have ample laws on the books that is just not being enforced. We lock these guys up on a regular basis, but once it goes in the system, it's out of our control.
But what does your faith tell you about it? Can it improve?
You asked about my faith as far as gun control?
Yes, and what we're doing as a nation to help come together and curb it, as far as your faith is concerned.
I think our moral attitude towards that is pretty much on a balance, as far as we believe morally that we can eventually have that done, controlling that aspect. But you're talking about a violent society, as far as we have, you know, rap music that's promoting, you know, violence. We're talking about movies that's promoting violence. We're talking about video games that's promoting violence. So you just can't say, hey, let's go ahead and make a law and control gun control. What about all these other things? Video games, rap music, and I grew up on rap music, video games. violent movies. So I think it's an easy fix for us to always say, hey, let's go out there and create new laws. You know, so, but I think it's deeper than, I think it's a deeper picture than just making or throwing another law on the books that we have an abundance of laws on the books.
Is it possible though?
I just answered the question. I said, until we correct those issues there, so it goes deeper than that. Let's stop, I'll tell you what, let's stop allowing violent video games. Let's stop allowing violent movies to be promoted. Let's stop promoting sexuality on TV. Then we have a chance.
Thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions from the gallery? Yes, sir.
I have one question. You said earlier that you were walking down King Street
Yes, sir.
and you noticed there was a gentleman carrying
Yes,
a
sir.
weapon. I would like to know from each officer, how would you approach that gentleman? Because that's a very touchy situation. He's carrying and you carrying. How would you approach it? What's your procedure?
Carefully and respectfully.
Good answer.
Could you explain that a little more?
I'm going to stay my distance, and I will talk to that gentleman respectfully.
For the most part, that a person so blatantly carrying it probably, like I said before, has misread his permit.
Would you confiscate that gun
Sir.
until, okay, I know you give him the.
Yeah, just, that's, we'd like to thank everyone for coming today. We'd like to take a moment to recognize the family of Miss Myra Singleton Thompson. If you all would stand and be recognized. And I have also been informed that Cynthia Hurd's family is also in the room. We'd like to recognize them as well. This concludes our discussion on gun control and building positive relationships. Thank you all very much for coming and engaging in this conversation. Thank our officers for donating their time. And we'd like to thank you all again. Go out, be active, be engaged, but most of all, be safe. Thank you.